require that by 2050, the carbon tax would have to be $245 up to, in their high-risk scenario, $13,000 per ton. If you're honest about wanting to try to reach this goal, then you should tell the public what you're going to do. And we're talking about $40 a ton here or $40 a ton here. The reality is, if you think this is a problem, if you believe the broken models of the IPCC, which they readily admit they can't forecast, and if you believe that something that must be done to do it, then you should be telling the general public what the end game here is. Because at those prices, my guess is the general public will run away from legislation like this. They will punish people who support legislation that is going to cost the average family not $20 or $50, but thousands of dollars a year. Because that is what's required by the IPCC's own math to get to the goals that the supporters of this legislation propose. Lastly, a couple final points. I do want to cover one item that I think Mr. Fitzgerald's testimony covered, which, and I agree with it. The economic impact of this type of legislation will be real and they'll be substantial. But they'll be real and substantial on low and middle income families. This is a highly, highly regressive tax. And we can talk about the numbers if you like. But the impact on the climate will be negligible at $20 or $40, but the impacts on real families here in New Hampshire will be substantial, significant, and crippling. It is a situation where the wealthy among us won't mind paying a carbon tax, but the bulk of this, because it is such a regressive form, is going to be borne by the people who can least afford to bear it. It's not only, if you want to look as an example here, look to the United Kingdom. They've imposed highly regressive energy taxes, and the result of that is massive energy poverty, especially of those on fixed incomes. Thousands of people die in the United Kingdom in winter because they can't afford energy anymore. They can't afford to heat their homes. They can't afford to protect their families. Legislation like this has consequences. And unfortunately, I think the underlying premises of this legislation are bad. I think that the implications for our economy is bad. And I certainly think that the implications for the families of this state will be bad. With that, I'll be happy to take any questions.
Any questions for Mr. Sununu?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you for taking my question. So the economic impact on the carbon tax, and assuming the people get reimbursed at admittedly some substantial rate perhaps, but the overall effect of the multiplier effect of other products costing more because your prices have gone up. Do you see those prices going down when those producers get reimbursed, or are we going to be settled with permanent and higher artificially increased prices because of the increase in the carbon tax?
Well, I would say that like most government programs, when you start to stick the government to the private sector, you end up distorting a lot of things, a lot of them unintended, unforeseen, and usually very negative. But let's talk about the impact on an average family. Under this legislation, a family can get up to, let's say, under a $40 carbon tax, a $200 rebate. It'll collect a certain amount of money, 70% of that will go to the rebates. The rebates back if you calculate this on a per capita basis in New Hampshire, I calculated something around $200 a year, which for a family of four, we get 3 credits, which gets about $600. Well, if that family has 2 cars, because they're a 2-earner family, they're driving, let's say, 15,000 miles a year, 30 miles back and forth to work for each of them. That alone is close to $400 of increased costs for that family. Now, consider that they may heat their home with heating oil or natural gas. You're probably adding another $180 to $200 on top of that. Suddenly their rebate is 0. Now, they're probably paying more for food, materials, pretty much every service. Those costs are going to be passed up by the manufacturers, by the service providers, because their energy costs are going up. And so, in the end, that family is likely to see pretty much no benefit despite the rebate, or more likely, in my opinion, probably end up losing out on the deal. Again, where the government has heavily imposed itself in energy markets, the net result, especially for low and middle income families, has never been good. I don't think you can find any place on the planet where it's been tried where the benefit has been that way.
Yes.
Thank you. So, one thing that hasn't really been addressed here, perhaps you can shed some light. How do the people get their money back? Do they have to fill out a form? Do they automatically do nothing and get money back? And how onerous might that administrative burden be on the family?
This is delving into the administrative costs of a program like this, and I would defer to others who probably have that more expertise on that. But let me address one aspect of this. You know, there are numerous studies that look at things like when a middle-income family is looking to buy a refrigerator, they don't end up buying the most efficient refrigerators, the high Energy Star refrigerators, and they want to know why. The biggest reason why is because the higher efficiency refrigerators cost more, and in the long run, that family may save money. But for most middle or low-income families, the issue is not what's my long-term saving. Their concerns is how much cash do I have and how do I afford this? The concept of a rebate and them getting money back so they'll be made whole sounds great on paper, but when it runs into the reality of the decisions, and again, now this is not just me saying this, there are numerous studies that show this, is that low and middle income families are going to make decisions based upon their ability today, not considering, you know what, I'm going to be getting a check from the state maybe at the end of the year for like $500, so I should modify my behavior today. That's not how real people work in the real world. It sounds good on paper, it's not the way it works. There are very few economic studies that show anything like that. And so to the extent of, is this going to give us the right behavior? Chances are for the wealthy people who can think about things like this and have that luxury, sure, you'll modify their behavior. But energy itself is a fairly inelastic demand. You can affect it on the margin, but people have to have gasoline to drive. People have to heat their homes. That usage is fossil fuels. That's not going to change for the next 30, 40 years. That demand is going to continue. And so, I find this very regressive and a situation that is not going to benefit the families of the state.
Okay, Representative Thompson.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Mr. Sununu, for coming here. I sympathize entirely with your comments about we need to make sure that people in that lower middle income class are somehow made whole by any kind of bill like this, and I think that can be done. But since you decided to dive into the climate change, I really want to know what makes you a climate change expert. Are you in any way involved in climate research? Do you have credentials to speak in that or not?
No, I've never claimed to be. As I said in our last hearing,
You're using all this stuff.
All right, let's.
Oh, no.
You
All
asked
this.
the question, he's answered.
Okay.
Folks, for the audience
No,
and the committee, I have 17 cards left. And I hope that the presenters will not be duplicate of what's been said before, try and bring us new stuff, and be as brief as you can, and like Mr. Sununu, don't read your testimony, but highlight it. For the members of the committee, keep that in mind, and don't make your questioning repetitive and not make it argumentative.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Let me answer. The material I've provided you is actually well documented. All these graphs in terms of the sources of the information. This is information from NOAA. It is information from the IPC itself. It's information directly from other client scientists in their papers. This is information from the U.S. Forest Service. This is, again, I footnote pretty much everything here in terms of where it's coming from. My point here is not to say that I am a climate scientist. My point here is to show you, the members of this committee, information which I don't think many of you probably have looked at. Probably many of you have not read the IPCC reports in detail, and I think you need to. I'm quoting directly from these reports to inform you that even the IPCC thinks that the models that this legislation and many policies are based on aren't really working.
Okay. So So then, because I am a member of the American Physical Society, which is the most prominent society of physicists in this country, and because overwhelmingly throughout the whole world, the consensus of scientists is pretty uniform about climate change, while the models are not, would you believe that most people in the world scientific community don't agree with your conclusions here?
Well, I'll say this. A consensus isn't science. Science is not consensus. That's not how science works. Science works on data and facts and being able to correlate what's going on, to understand historical trends, and extrapolate from that what's going on. I've talked about the science in terms of the climate sensitivities here. IPCC still maintains climate sensitivity data from 1970. I think you should wonder why. Because all of the most recent science show that the sensitivities are far below that. I quoted you from the IPCC, its own reports. Are you saying that the IPCC doesn't believe the actual text that it prints? I think that there is plenty of evidence to call into question whether we fully understand the climate.
Okay, let's move on.
Yep.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A question about cap and trade. Some people refer to the acid rain program, SO2, and cap and trade, and this as being somewhat comparable. What's your comment on that?
I find that a dubious proposition in that the sulfur program and cap and trade for emissions from basically from coal power plants was a very point location type program. There were not thousands and thousands of participants in that. Much like in the carbon tax, you're going to be collecting taxes from basically any energy user in the state is going to be responsible to some extent for energy here. I don't find it comparable, in addition to the fact of the sulfur program itself, albeit, yes, very successful. But it's a program that I think was designed with a different intention, a different type of market, and a different type of market implications. This is a broad-based tax. The cap and trade program was not a broad-based tax. That's not what it was. This is. This is taxing everything that moves, uses energy, heats something. It's not comparable in my opinion.
Thank you, Sharon. Thank you for coming, Mr. Sununu. You are presenting information from the IPCC, and you're acknowledging the fact that on many of the data points that they present, they're, as scientists, to the scientific method, they're not willing to say, we can absolutely predict, because they know that prediction is not science. Science is knowledge. And yet you did mention that the IPCC had several conclusions and also recommendations about where the carbon tax will be going in the future. And their estimations are that carbon tax will be based on the actual cost of what these emissions will be doing to our planet and to us. In other words, we're going to have to pay those costs eventually. So I think that's something I'd be interested in hearing you comment on, because I think you're presenting certain information to say that this report is not helpful because they are inconclusive, when in reality they did draw conclusions. They simply told you the aspects of the report that they were unable to give you definitive future information on. And since one of those items is that cost that they're saying we will have to pay one way or another, I just feel like what you're saying is not connected to the fact that there is an actual cost. And that is what the bill is attempting to begin to grapple with, I think.
So let me address, I think, the two issues that come in there. Yes, there is a disconnect in the IPCC reports. When you read the summary of policymakers, which is written by political people, not by the scientists themselves, it gives a drastically different impression than when you actually read the science that goes into those reports. And that's why I pulled out specifically much of the material there, which you can see. They don't know how to model climate. They have extreme uncertainties and low confidence in almost every considerable element of climate. And yet, yes, ironically, they still propose that the climate models, which so much of our climate science is based on, are accurate and can forecast. But when you get into the nitty-gritty, when you delve into the details, you see that there is a disconnect, and it's a disconnect on their behalf, not on mine. Clearly, when you read into the signs, you'll understand how little that we know. With respect to your other point about putting a price on carbon, you're right. They are trying to put a price on carbon. They're trying to put a price on carbon, saying that if we don't do this, then our global models are forecasting major problems. And therefore, to address the costs that may occur in 2070 or 2075, we have to impose huge taxes today. That's what they are saying. Well, again, and if you read through my testimony in more detail, specifically about the social cost of carbon, when you look at the economic structure of the way that they assess what we have to pay today, you come to the realization that they're using too low discount rates, that they are assuming massive costs based on the worst case scenarios in RCP 8.5, which, again, global models really don't work, so I'm not sure why you would rely on that. They are assessing certainly here in the U.S., and when we did a social cost of carbon, global costs, global benefits for a particular cost in the United States. In other words, having the United States pay everything to fix the global problem. There's numerous problems in the way people assess and justify the social cost of carbon. Again, I'll refer you to my testimony about the specific aspects of that, but you'll get a sense of why I think the underlying problem is, one, they're overestimating the social cost of carbon, and two, if the people who wrote this legislation actually believe it, I think that they should be honest with the general public and talk about a carbon tax which is multiples higher than what they're proposing here.
Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Could you just tell me what IPCC and NOAA stands for?
NOAA is our basically the weather agency here in the United States. Again, it's NOAA.gov. Part of the
Thank you for your testimony. Mr. Sununu, you said one thing that surprised me. I think I'm paraphrasing you, but I think it's a pretty close paraphrase. You said thousands of people die in the UK in winter because they can't afford to buy energy for heat.
Correct.
That surprised me. I would love to know what your source for that is.
There was a recent study in the United Kingdom looking at, it was either this past winter or the winter before, and I'll get you some material on that directly, Representative. That basically looked at the impact of the energy tariffs and the inability of mainly pensioners, people on fixed income, and their inability to heat their homes. They had a spike in deaths in the United Kingdom. I want to say it was over 5,000. It could be as high as 20,000, but I will get you direct information about that, Representative.
Thank you.
All right, good. Okay.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, members.